Whether you're 14-0 or 6-8, it is never too late to bolster up that lineup. And we have some waiver wire ads for you today. We have our 7 top waiver wire ads. We have handcuffs to add to your team. We have our top tight end and QB streamers. So we have something for everyone in this one. And Ty, we're going to start with our top waiver wire ad of the week, who is Tank Bigsby. Right? He's only 6% rostered in Yahoo. We're using Yahoo today because they seem to be kind of the middle between ESPN, Sleeper, all these redraft locations that you're using. And in week 14, he showed out 18 carries. Well, I shouldn't say showed out. He showed out from a usage perspective. That's the way we'll put it, because he had 18 carries, but only 55 yards. He did have a touchdown on the ground, 2 targets for 1 reception and 7 yards. Bigsby was a guy that everyone got in on. Then he got hurt. Looked like ETN might be taking over, but then he showed this week, nah, this is my backfield right now, and it feels like it's going to be like that for the rest of the season. Ty, do you think Tank Bigsby has enough to be a top 24 running back these next couple of weeks?
It feels like a cop-out to say that with the upcoming schedule, like it's very dependent on the matchup, but I mean, you get the Jets this upcoming week, and then you go Vegas, and then you go Tennessee, and you go Indianapolis. I think there is some success to be had. I'm not going to expect the world of Tank Bigsby, but with every team back and playing the rest of the year, no more bye weeks so we have to worry about or anything like that. It's going to be tough to crack the top 24 just because it feels like there's a very clear set top 24 already. But again, for as good as Tank Bigsby has looked this year on the ground, if he continues to get the volume that he got this past week, there is some potential that, falls into the end zone, maybe picks up a couple receptions just on a lucky chance. He does kind of crack that top 24 range.
Yeah, you talked about that volume. Do you think that's sticky? Do you think, okay, we've seen the transition from ETN to Bigsby, or was it more game script? What do you think happened there?
I do think it's pretty game script dependent. I mean, we just saw in week 13 where Jacksonville had to abandon the run because they're playing from behind against Houston, and we saw a bunch of ETN in that game. But against Tennessee, in a game that, yes, they were playing from behind, but it wasn't an insurmountable deficit to overcome. I mean, it was just 6 points, and they came back in the fourth quarter. So when you look at the Jets, Vegas, and Tennessee, I think those game scripts should favor Tank Bigsby. But at the same time, we're talking about a Jacksonville team that it feels like every single week you don't know what you're going to get out of them. So there is no security. There's still an uneasy feeling about exactly what the workload will be like. But I feel like with the matchups, the game script does favor Tank Bigsby a bit more than usual.
Yeah, I think so. I think at this point they're moving towards Bigsby. It feels like ETN's kind of on his way out of Jacksonville. Like that relationship, along with the Doug Peterson relationship, is going to be coming to an end here pretty soon. So it does feel like we're seeing that shift to Bigsby. He really feels like the guy that has a chance to truly crack your starting lineup, even if you're not just hurting for a player, right? Even if you're not I would start anybody at this point who's on the field. So I agree. But like we said, 46% roster. So if he's rostered in your league, we're sorry, there's a 50-50 chance. This next guy is rostered only 22% of your leagues, and that's Elijah Moore. Now, week 14 didn't really spark you to be, excited, add him to your roster. Only 3 catches on 4 targets for 34 yards. But he does get Kansas City this week, who's actually given up 280 receiving yards a game over their last 5 games. And Elijah Moore has kind of been the forgotten wide receiver in Cleveland, because it started out with Cedric Tillman. Oh my goodness, he's this year's Amon-Ra, when in fact he was this year's Elijah Moore for when he was a rookie. And then it's been Jerry Jeudy's been cooking, but Elijah Moore has been kind of on this every other week schedule. Week 8 in Baltimore, 16 points. Week 9 and for the Chargers, he had 6 points. Then he had a bye. Then New Orleans 18.6, Pittsburgh 5.1, Denver 19.2, Pittsburgh 6.4. Ty, is this a Elijah Moore week? And I guess even more than that, do you have any confidence in starting him? Like how bad does your team have to be hurting for you to consider putting Elijah Moore in the lineup?
Oh, it's got to be bad. I mean, where you're looking at probably some of the other waiver wire options that we'll talk about here in a second. Maybe, I mean, like, just because it's a prevalent name that has not been doing good at all this year in fantasy football. Like, if you're looking at like Deebo Samuel or Elijah Moore, I might consider starting Elijah Moore, which is absurd to say, but that is fantasy football in 2024, ladies and gentlemen, right? Like you said, with this Kansas City matchup too, they are seventh in EPA per dropback since week 10. So you can definitely pass the ball against this Kansas City defense. And if Jameis Winston is going to keep slinging the ball all over the yard, right? 41 pass attempts, 46, 46, 27 against Pittsburgh, but then 58 and 41 this past week. There's something there for Elijah Moore against a defense. I like I said, you can definitely pass on.
For sure. I'm just gonna give you a couple names real quick, and I want you to just tell me.
Oh boy,
we won't even look at. I'm not even gonna consider like matchups, but just we'll say rest of the season. Who would you rather have, Elijah Moore or Nick Westbrook-Ikhine?
probably Elijah Moore.
Elijah Moore or MVS?
Elijah Moore.
Elijah Moore or Xavier Worthy?
Oh man, I might say Elijah Moore.
Yeah, I think that's the line. I think I lean Worthy just because of he is connected to Mahomes, but it's not like he's been lighting it up either. So I think that should just give you the line, right? We've seen Worthy's put up 7 points each of the last 3 weeks. We've seen some boom weeks. We've seen some not. So that's probably, right in the wide receiver 40 to 45 range is kind of where you're looking at Elijah Moore. So he's a guy you can plug in. But again, if you're hurting, he'd be almost a wide receiver handcuff, right? Because if something happens to Tillman or something happens to Jerry Jeudy, he's going to see the field a ton, and the targets will just go up.
I mean, even David Njoku too. I mean,
yes,
if Njoku gets
100%.
hurt, Elijah Moore probably gets an uptick in usage.
Yes.
Then.
Yep. And we've seen decent usage from him. So I like him there. The next one is Sincere McCormick. He's a guy that I kind of figured we might be putting in the handcuff range, but he's only rostered in 15% of leagues. We just see 15 attempts for 78 yards last week, 3 targets, 2 receptions, and 11 receiving yards. But there's been a lot of buzz about Sincere McCormick taking over kind of the Zamir White role of last year. Alexander Mattison is a free agent at the end of the year. Zamir White, they could cut for, $300,000 in dead cap, which is nothing in NFL terms. And it sounds like the Raiders might just want to see what they have in him, right? That's kind of what the vibe that I'm getting. I don't mind that at all. Ty, what do you think about that with Sincere McCormick? Do you think he's going to have standalone value? If, both Zamir White and Alexander Mattison are back this week, are you maybe picking him up but staying away from him? What are your thoughts there?
So I get where it comes from because you just look at the last 3 games for McCormick, he's averaging over 5 yards a carry. So when you take a look then at, again, Zamir White, Alexander Mattison, and Amir Abdullah, Sincere McCormick has really been the most efficient runner on this team. So it wouldn't surprise me if they continue to use him as kind of the lead back or at least the guy to get the most carries in this backfield. But the thing that has not come around for him is receiving work, right? He's only had 2 catches in his last 2 games, in each of his last 2 games, I should say. That probably is going to continue to fall to an Amir Abdullah if Alexander Mattison continues to be out. When Mattison comes back, I would not be surprised if Mattison is going to get the receiving work and then he's going to chip enough away into the rushing workload for Sincere McCormick to not really be I feel like startable is a very generic term, but like I think generally speaking with Sincere McCormick, he's somebody to roster at this point because these running back ads are very few and far between right now. For a guy like Tank Bigsby and Sincere McCormick, guys that will be able to get a workload right now because of their situations, handcuffs. I think you kind of let it off with this. Sincere McCormick, Tank Bigsby, they're not exactly handcuffs. They're like just a step above a handcuff
Mhm.
at this point.
Yeah, I think you put that perfectly. Like for sure roster McCormick this, and then this week, if Zamir White or Alexander Madison, I would sit him on your bench and just see what happens. Because if he takes over again, then yeah, for the next 2 games, you got a startable running back. If not, then you know what? You used a roster space, got rid of a guy that you're probably not going to, that's not going to sniff your starting lineup anyways. All right, before we hit our next 4 waiver wire ads or handcuffs, QB streams, and tight end streams, we just want to remind you, hit that subscribe button over here on YouTube. We love, doing this for you guys, and we just want to make sure that you're a part of the fellowship. We know that it's very easy to do, and we don't want you to miss any of our content through the rest of the playoffs, through the rest of the NFL playoffs, through draft season, off season, fantasy football draft season, because we'll have content for you all the time. So we do not want you to miss that. So again, just hit that subscribe button for us and turn on those notifications. Ty, for these next 3 wide receivers, I think we're going to bunch them together and we're going to kind of talk about them all in a similar light because that's kind of how I see them. We have Xavier Legette, who is rostered in 28% of leagues, Ray McLeod, who's rostered in 18, and Jalen McMillan, who's rostered in 5. Now, Xavier Legette didn't have a fantastic fantasy day yesterday or I guess when you're hearing this 2 days ago against Philly, only 2 receptions for 39 yards, but did see 8 targets. Ray McLeod, 11 targets, 8 receptions, 98 yards. And then Jalen McMillan, 4 receptions, 7 targets, and 59 yards and 2 touchdowns. If you had to order these 3 in your priority of how you would go about adding them, what order would you put these 3 guys?
Ooh, good question. Personally, I would go Ray McLeod, Xavier Legette, and then Jalen McMillan. For Ray McLeod, he is on the team that plays in 3 wide receiver sets the most and by a very considerable margin as well, according to Sumer Sports. Atlanta runs 3 wide receiver sets 89% of the time, and the next closest is the Rams, who were the leaders last year, and the Rams run it at 82%. So Atlanta is pretty much exclusively out of these 3 wide receiver sets. So he's on the field the most. And there's nothing that I can say to be like, you know what, we're going to continue to see these 8 reception, 98-yard games from Ray McLeod. But if Atlanta is going to continue to throw the ball and they're going to just rack up yardage and all those different kinds of things, I think Ray McLeod probably has the most value out of the other 2 guys. Legette is interesting because if Thielen goes down, then like Legette is the guy. He is probably the favored target then by Bryce Young. But until Adam Thielen, comes back down to earth, I'll say, because it feels like we're seeing 30-year-old Adam Thielen again at this point. So yeah, again, I would rank him Ray McLeod, Xavier Legette, and then Jalen McMillan.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go the same. I might switch Xavier Legette ahead of. I think it's Xavier Legette and Ray McLeod, and then Jalen McMillan.
Sure.
Because McMillan, this is the first game we've really seen from him, right? And it was really just because of the 2 touchdowns. There is a role for him to find there, next to Mike Evans, right? They do need a second wide receiver, so he can step into that. I just think we haven't quite seen it. Whereas, Legette over the past couple of weeks, we've seen 6, 8 targets. It hasn't really translated into fantasy points yet, but he's also playing 94, 96, 95% of snaps. So he's out there a ton. And then when you get teams like Dallas in week 15, Arizona's been a little bit better against the pass, but then Tampa Bay in week 17, I think there's a lot of room for him to exploit those matchups. Ray McLeod, right? He's got another decent matchups against Vegas, the Giants, and Washington. I think that Xavier Legette's targets are going to be probably a little more sticky than McLeod because he is going to be playing behind Darnell Mooney and Drake London. But it's very close. And if I'm looking at adding those guys, I'm going to start with Legette and McLeod. And depending on your team, I think they could be interesting guys. If you're in a 2 flex league and you're really hurting, I think I still think that's why we talked about earlier. Elijah Moore is ahead of them, but I do think these guys will be interesting ads there. And then the last guy we're going to talk about as an ad is more of a stash because he's not going to play this week. And it's hopeful that he plays in week 16 or 17, but it's Hollywood Brown, who is in 19% of leagues. He is playing, or he's hopefully going to play week 16, week 17. Even if he does play, you don't know what it looks like. But he would be a guy that if you just got an extra spot in your bench, why not pick him up? At the very least, if he pops in week 16, even if you have no interest in starting him, you don't have a league mate who can pick him up and start him week 17. So you're almost playing a little bit of defense there. If he does start week 16, I don't think I can start him just because we have no idea what it looks like. But if he plays week 16 and does well, then you have him for week 17. And I'd rather try and pick him up now when you probably can get him for free on the waiver wire, right? If you're spending fab, you're not going to have to spend anything on Hollywood Brown because nobody's thinking about it because we just haven't heard much about it. Ty, do you have any interest in picking up Hollywood Brown, or are you kind of just like, I just don't see any fantasy value there?
I get the kind of keep away game that you would play with Hollywood Brown. I'm not expecting Hollywood Brown to be a major contributor, not just in fantasy, but in the NFL as well. When he comes back, it feels like they are comfortable with their kind of rotation of Worthy, Watson, Juju, and D-Hop right now. He will definitely get back and start playing for the Chiefs. So I think there is some merit to it. Like I said, kind of playing that keep away game, but I'm not going out of my way. I'm not making it a priority. And it's only in a deep league. I'm not, if I'm, my bench is only 7 players, I'm going to have a tough time finding or, deciding on who to drop to pick up a guy like Hollywood Brown that may not even play in the regular season for all we know.
No, I think that's fair critique. I think it's if you have, guys at the end of your bench that you've been holding on to for, so long and they just haven't produced. Like if you still got like a Tyler Boyd at the end of your bench, I would drop Hollywood, right? I think it's that type of player. I'm not considering cutting, Wan'Dale Robinson right now, even though he hasn't been great, just because we've seen him get usage. Even Dontavian Wicks, I think I'm still holding on over him. So like it's very low, and like you said, deeper leagues, I think is where it is. All righty, before we get on to our handcuffs, streamer tight ends, and streamer quarterbacks, we're going to take a quick break and hear from our friends over at Underdog Fantasy.
Today's podcast episode is brought to you by our friends over at Underdog Fantasy. Now, we love Underdog. It is the easiest place to play best ball formats, and they even have their own form of player props called Pick'em. You can make up to 20 times your money on a single night by correlating props together. 2 picks will triple your money, 3 will 6 times it, 4 will 10 times it, and 5 plays that all hit will multiply your entry by 20. You can even place insurance on your picks too, so if only 4 of your 5 props hit, you still get 10 times your entry. And if you use our code FELLAS when signing up, Underdog is going to double your first deposit up to $100.
We are back. We're going to hit you with some handcuffs that you should have. We're going to hit you some streaming tight ends and some streaming quarterbacks for week 15. Ty, we're going to start with the handcuffs. And the way we're going to do this is I'm just going to list the 6 that we feel are the most important handcuffs who are not already rostered. And then we'll kind of discuss who should be rostering them. Do they have any standalone value? We'll kind of go into that. But number 1 is Patrick Taylor. And before we get him, we do both think you should put him in probably as the number 1 waiver priority going into this week, maybe 2 behind Tank Bigsby, because we don't know what the status of Isaac Guerendo is going to be for week 15. It is a short week for them. They do play on Thursday. He said he might be fine. Kyle Shanahan said he's day to day. But the other thing was we just aren't sure that he's going to get a full workload, right? There's just so much going into it, but he is probably worth the waiver wire claim. The other 5, Isaiah Davis for the Jets. He seemed to kind of get more of the valuable touches over Braylon Allen. Trey Benson, the rookie for the Arizona Cardinals. Ray Davis, rookie for the Buffalo Bills. Raheem Mostert, who I was surprised, but not really, that he's rostered in 48% of leagues. He just hasn't been playing well and hasn't been healthy. So it makes sense, but it just feels like when you say his name, he should be rostered more. And then Cam Akers behind Aaron Jones for the Minnesota Vikings, who's rostered in 16% of leagues. Ty, out of all of these guys, who do you think has a chance of standalone value? And then is there a different answer for who you'd prioritize in your waiver wire ads?
So I guess in terms of just who will have the standalone value if things kind of fall their way, in my opinion, it's actually Cam Akers. I think with Ray Davis, if James Cook goes down, I think we do see Ty Johnson still involved in Buffalo. If James Conner goes down in Arizona, we'll still see Amari DeMarcado and Trey Benson. In Miami, I'm not sure what to think. It feels like they just have zero trust with Raheem Mostert at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And with then, we look at Isaiah Davis and the Jets. He needs Braylon Allen to go down and Breece Hall to go down to really, in my opinion, have enough value in my book to be like, yeah, I should add him to my roster. Then we get to Patrick Taylor, and it's like, okay, interesting. He does have the lead running back right now. On his way. I don't want to say he's on his way down because there's nothing that says that Guerrero is going to be hurt, but you know what I'm trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
I would still put Cam Akers ahead of Patrick Taylor, but because of how things are playing out right now, Cam Akers is not going to get on the field over Aaron Jones. Patrick Taylor could get on the field as soon as this Thursday because of Guerrero. Yep. So for me, it's those two guys. But if I'm looking at just a long-term handcuff option, I'm rolling with Cam Akers.
For sure. Would you then, okay, so Patrick Taylor's probably the guy, even if you don't have Guerrero or anything, put in the waiver wire claim, right? Because if he hits, you want the 49ers running back. There's a lot of ambiguity around that situation. Any of the other 5 guys we listed, Isaiah Davis, Trey Benson, Ray Davis, Raheem Mostert, and then obviously Cam Akers, who you said is your favorite, would you put in a claim for them if you don't have their starting running back? Or are you only putting in the claim if you do have their starting running back?
I would say for me, it's just this if I have the starting running back, just because some of these guys, they would still be in a split backfield if their starter were to go down. Some of these guys need multiple guys to go down. For me, it's only if I have the starter. And I hate to bring the Akers back up again, but that's the only one I would think about if I don't have Aaron Jones. But even at that, I struggle to justify making a spot for Cam Akers if I don't have Aaron Jones.
Yeah, you would pretty much have to have like a legitimate starting team where you don't need any depth and a free bench spot, right? Mm-hmm. If you have all those and you're going, Tank Bigsby would never sniff my lineup, or maybe I would never get him or he's already on a roster. Then yeah, I could see adding Cam Akers there if you got a free bench spot. But I'm not dropping somebody, to go add one of these guys unless I do have that player. If I have Aaron Jones, I would, I'd probably add Bigsby, Elijah Moore, and then, maybe Sincere McCormick. Probably not. I'd probably do Actually, I probably just had Tank Bigsby and then Patrick Taylor, and then Cam Akers would be my next guy. Right. If I got James Conner, Trey Benson would be that next guy, because the last thing you want is to be in week 16 and you lost your starting running back and you don't have anyone to back him up. Right. Where you're, the guy you're facing has him just sitting on your bench, taking him away from you. Well, Ty is having an eye attack over there.
Oh boy.
I just want to remind you that we do have our Discord. We've got over 4,500 of you in there. Answering questions all the time, weekly rankings in there, trade advice, all of that. So make sure it's in the audio podcast that you're listening to, or video. It's in the description of that. That's what I'm trying to say. That's the words that I am trying to get out of my mouth. So just make sure to click on that link. Join us over there. It is a ton of fun. Ty, we got tight end and QB streamers for week 15. Our top 3, and this is actually probably the best you're going to get because these guys are just coming off the bye. It's Hunter Henry at 40% rostered, Juwan Jennings at 10%, and Zach Ertz at 44%.
Juwan Johnson, not Juwan Jennings.
Juwan
Johnson.
Juwan Johnson. I know it's wrong, and I keep saying it. I've been saying it all day. Typed it in our chat wrong, and so it's just been absolutely brutal from that aspect. It would be kind of nice if we could put Juwan Jennings right now. I'd be okay with it, but Um, but Ty, if we're looking at it right, Hunter Henry gets Arizona, Juwan Johnson gets Washington, and Zach Ertz gets New Orleans. Who would you? I guess let's just do it again. Let's rank these three guys in order of if you need a tight end streamer. If you've got Kyle Pitts and you're just like, why have I even been trying to start him the past couple of weeks? I need something else. How would you prioritize these three?
I would probably go Hunter Henry, Juwan Johnson, and Zach Ertz. Hunter Henry, Zach Ertz, Juwan Johnson.
Yep.
Juwan Johnson over the last 3 games has been doing pretty well. I mean, he did just finish as the tight end 3 overall in week 14, and he's gone for 8.6 and 12 points in the other 2 games before that. I don't want to outright say I don't want anything to do with the Saints offense because Alvin Kamara is still a thing. Mm-hmm. That being said, I'm banking too much on Juwan Johnson to feel comfortable as him as a streaming option. So between Zach Ertz and Hunter Henry, then Zach Ertz has been doing decent as well. I mean, 9th in targets since week 10. I have more assurance in Hunter Henry, who's been coming through ever since Drake May took over as a starter, versus Zach Ertz, who's scored in 3 straight games which has pretty much helped him to get to where he's been the last 3 weeks.
Yeah, I think, if you are hurting for a tight end, you should be pretty happy this week because you do have 2 options who've been startable on your waiver wire because they just came off their bye. But I'd agree with that ranking. And then for QBs, Drake May, Jameis Winston, Will Levis, Aaron Rodgers, Bryce Young, all under 35% rostered. If I'm looking at them going into this week, this is how I would order them. I would take Drake May at Arizona. Then I would probably go with Jameis against Kansas City, Levis against Cincinnati. I'd go Rodgers against Jacksonville, Levis against Cincinnati, and Bryce Young against Dallas. Do you agree with how that order? May, Winston, Rodgers, Levis, Young, or would you switch that order up at all?
I would go Drake May. I would probably go Bryce Young just because this Carolina team has been a lot better as of late. And Bryce Young, the performances still aren't great, but at least the matchup against Dallas does give me some hope.
That's true.
So I would go Drake May, Bryce Young, probably would go Jameis, Levis, and then Rodgers. I know Rodgers probably has the best matchup then between Winston and Levis as well. At that point, it's between the Cleveland, Tennessee, and Jets offense that I think are currently below the Panthers and Patriots offenses in terms of their quarterback output right now. I know Rodgers just had a pretty decent game. Mm-hmm. May, Young, Winston, Levis, Rodgers for me.
All right. And I don't hate that. I think the consensus is just May is number 1. Bryce Young probably has some decent upside, and so does Winston. And then, Rodgers and Levis. If you want, I can't even, I was going to say if you want 14 to 16, but you can't even say that with those 2, even with decent matchups. So if you can get May, get May. Like that's where it should be if you need a quarterback. But I do know there's enough quarterbacks playing well where you're probably not dipping too deep, into the quarterback streamers unless you're really, really hurting. But that wraps it up for our waiver wire show today. Hopefully there was something on here that you can use to better your team. We talked about over, what did we went 21 players. So, we talked about enough guys that if you needed to add somebody, we've covered them. But we hope that you join us tomorrow. We have our what's the episode called? We just started doing it. Why can I not?
Risers and Fallers.
Oh my goodness. 10 risers and fallers. Then we got our 24 starts and sits for the first week of your playoffs, or maybe we are trying to help you avoid the toilet bowl. So hopefully we can help you out. If you want to follow us, I'm at CamelFF on the X, at Tyler_Plath for Tyler. The EFF fellas on Instagram, FFLs on the X. I meant to do the X first, but then said the wrong one. Fantasy Football Fellas on TikTok, Facebook, and YouTube. Fantasy Football Fellas Shorts on YouTube as well for a short form over there. But yeah, make sure you're following us everywhere, especially since TikTok might be going away if you're over there. So if you want a short form content, follow us on a different platform. If you're just here for our long form content, follow our short form on another platform. But with that, we will see you guys tomorrow, and deuces.
Deuces.